The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
I'm Mary Rozak, Director of Communications for Albany County. Welcome to Albany County News, where you're going to hear for the next 30 minutes or so about one of the very special programs that Albany County has to offer and what we're doing in the month of October in particular to, I don't want to say celebrate, but to highlight a month that is very important, very critical to women, children, fathers, families in Albany County. Joining me today, Karen Ziegler, the director of our Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. Karen, let's jump right in and talk about October. I know we always, when we say October is or September is, or June is, we say we're celebrating something. I guess we're celebrating life when we talk about October, but it is Domestic Violence Prevention and Awareness Month, correct?
Yes.
Is that the correct title?
Yes.
Okay. Albany County, every single day, I mean, you live it, you breathe it.
Yes, absolutely.
What are we doing in the month of October in particular?
This year, we're very excited. We're doing a couple of things. We're doing a toiletry drive, and at a press conference on October 4th at 10:30 in the Cahill room, we're going to be announcing this toiletry drive. So we have numerous sites throughout the county, including 112 State Street, where we will be accepting toiletries and personal care items for women, children, and men, because men can also be victims of domestic violence as well. Over the course of the month, we like to collect these toiletries and honestly, any small things. If people want to send in small toys for children or books, we would not discourage any kind of donation. At the end of the month, we're going to collect them all and then distribute them to the shelters throughout Albany County. Equinox Shelter certainly serves the majority of our domestic violence victims, but other shelters get overflow, so we want to also contact the other shelters within Albany County and then distribute these personal care bags among the shelters to give to their women, men, and children that are victims of domestic violence. So we're very excited about this. I think there's a lot of small things that just mean the world to people who have been displaced. They're out of their homes, they're away from their friends and possibly their schools, and they're in shelter for their safety and protection. We thought that if there was any way that we could offer some small comfort to them, that this would mean a great deal. It's those small moments, I think, that people can find normalcy and some safety and comfort.
You're very passionate, and I know that we've talked before, and I know that your passion really comes through for the survivors, for those men, women, and children who have lived with domestic violence. Albany County served almost 1,000 people every single year through the center.
Yes,
and that's not even the breadth of how many people actually are victims of some type of abuse.
It's not, and those actually is probably more like 1,000 families, because if you look at if there's children involved, then it's not just the individual partners, it's their children, it's their collective families also. So when you say I think the numbers are deceiving they may seem lower, and domestic violence is very complicated. So there are many reasons why people don't report. So I can say that those are the people that are actually maybe seeking services, and then we could double, even triple that to the numbers that are actually experiencing domestic violence on a regular basis. 1,500 women are killed every year in this country for domestic violence. Every minute, 20 people are hurt through intimate partner violence and assault. These numbers are staggering. This is really an epidemic, Mary.
And Albany County and the state of New York really is at the forefront when it comes to making people aware and working on college campuses as well. Talk to me. I know I think it's been about a year, but last time we talked about some of the work that you're involved with on college campuses.
Yes, we're very excited. Department of Health has given us a grant through the governor's legislation, the Enough is Enough. We have additional funding, so we actually have our campus coordinator, and she certainly does sexual assault, but she also does dating violence as well. So we're very, very happy. We've got some wonderful relationships with the college campuses where we're on campus and we're doing prevention education, and we're doing outreach, and we're doing all kinds of exciting work. If I could just speak to you, Albany, for example, they just trained some of my staff in what's called bringing in the bystander, which is a wonderful bystander engagement process. So we're going to be collaborating with Albany staff to train 17,000 people a year, their staff, their faculty, their athletes, the students. This is a monumental opportunity for us to really do the work.
Well, what does it mean, though, bringing in the bystander? I mean, someone's not standing there watching, or are they? That they're seeing something, and it is a domestic violence incident. They don't recognize it?
Absolutely. And I think the bystander engagement process is so important, everywhere from bullying, from preschool and through school, to college, to in our communities as individuals. I think a number of people can be aware of violence and don't know what to do. So this bringing the bystander program and some of the other programs that we do, there's really two things. One is we educate people that if you're seeing this type of behavior, if you're hearing this type of these words and this kind of this mentality, this is problematic. We really want to raise people's awareness to things. It's not just a boys will be boys, or this isn't our business, let's just keep going. But if you're hearing certain things, if your friend is reporting that they're with a partner and that individual is texting them maybe 50 times an hour, several hundred times a day, and demanding where are you and what are you doing and who are you doing it with, that's not love and devotion. That's actually kind of stalking behavior.
Sure.
But a lot of young people don't recognize that as problematic. They think this is what's normal in relationships. We look at media, we look at the television and movies, and they actually portray very unhealthy relationships as perfectly normal and acceptable. So we do a lot of re-education on what normal, healthy relationships are. Again, from friendships all the way through dating and domestic violence. So as we're educating them on these are concerns around sexual violence. These are things to be watchful for if you're out with a group of friends or for yourself. And then the dating and domestic violence, we want to empower people to do something. Office of Prevention of Domestic Violence did a campaign a couple years ago called Don't Do Nothing. And there's a huge spectrum of behaviors and interventions that people can do. Keeping themselves safe, but it could be something that they could do in that moment. They could be distracting the person that they feel may be abusive or having maybe ill intent. They could pull in some allies from around the room. They could seek out the person possibly on the way to the restroom or away, just away from the abuser for a second. They could get that individual back to their dorm room or their home safely. They could provide them with information, education, some resources. So there's a whole gamut, the whole array of possibilities where we can look to make our community safer by taking care of each other, by being an engaged bystander, not just a bystander who's going to turn away and say, well, it's not really my business, I don't want to get involved, but one who says, this doesn't feel right to me. What can I do right now to see if this person can be safe? Sure.
Let's take the flip side to that, because so often you hear stories or you see it, sometimes you see it portrayed on TV or in the movies that there is someone who is the victim of abuse and really doesn't recognize it no matter what anyone else is saying or doesn't seem to want to do anything about it. How do you deal with that?
That's complicated, and it's a couple of different things. One thing we'll talk about is very few batterers start with significant abuse. It's often subtle. It's possibly eroding someone's self-esteem, telling them that they're ugly or they're worthless. It might be isolating them from friends and family. Maybe they say, I don't want you working, I want you home. So they isolate them from a workplace. They make them financially dependent on them. So it's a gradual, I think, eroding of a person's sense of self. And then maybe it becomes psychological abuse and possibly physical abuse. So I think that a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of how they got here. And now they're in a place where they have no money, they have no car, they have no access to bank accounts. The person may monitor the phone usage, they may monitor the mileage on the car and pennies in the checkbook.
Or they may have children as well.
And they very well may have children. So they can find themselves in a situation not knowing how they got there, and then they have the situation where they love their partner. They're very, very connected. They have history. They may have children. They don't want the partner to go away. They want the violence to stop. So they may be very ambivalent about sending the offender to jail or even reporting it. Sometimes offenders are very, very manipulative and they threaten. We see a lot of relations between domestic violence and animal abuse. If the offender kills the family pet, with the message is very clearly, well, you could be next.
Sure.
So they can break the individual's precious items. Again, you could be next. There's nothing I can't take away from you. They can threaten them with losing custody of their children. They can, and we see so often in the news, when there's a domestic violence homicide, it's not just often the individual and their partner. It may be children or other family members. So those make very good threats. So you have a person who has learned to tolerate a great deal of abuse and may tolerate it further to protect themselves, their children, and their families. So from the outside, we say, why don't they just leave? Or why don't they stay away? But when you're in the situation, I think it's very complicated and complex. We like to see the domestic violence victim as the expert in their situation. They have survived this. They know the batterer better than we ever could. And we really want to empower that person to make the best choices they can. We do safety planning with them. We talk about options. But we really respect that person's individual decision-making process when it comes to their safety.
When it comes to the offender, how often in your experience is it that that offender is rehabilitated or changes his or her ways? Your experience.
I have to say that I think it is rare that a person is actually rehabilitated. More often than not, the couple can stay together, or if the one partner, the victim, leaves, oftentimes the batterer will find another victim. We see when we have a database and we have names, and we'll have different victims with the same batterer over. So
is that's why it's critical? I'm getting to the point of the bystander.
Absolutely,
engaging.
Absolutely, because sometimes the person can't act for themselves, and the batterer is very unlikely to change a behavior that works for them. If they want, it is about power and control. It's a pattern of power and control. And most people with power and control are not going to give that up voluntarily. Some outside agency has to come in and create a situation where that batterer is going to make sustained change. They're not going to do it because it's the right thing. They're just not going to make that decision.
Let's make the transition. You mentioned bullying.
Yes.
So let's talk about, from batterer, let's talk about the bully. Yes. How often is it that the bully is able to be rehabilitated? I would think that may be a different story.
I think it really is. We look at violence as a spectrum, and we see bullying as the beginning stages, like the seeds. Okay. And then from that can come other behaviors to the point where possibly there's sexual violence and domestic violence and dating violence. We really want to intervene on that early childhood level where it is bullying. A lot of the times the bully there's violence in that individual's home, and they've seen that aggression and psychological dominance is effective. So they're observing this. Not always, but certainly it can happen that way. Children who are singled out, about 50% of school-age children identify as having at least one bullying episode. Children who are different, they may appear smaller or weaker. They may be very thin or a little overweight. They could be immigrants and refugees. They're somehow different from the norm, and they're identified as the target of bullying. We love to get into schools, and we love to talk about communication skills and empathy and relationships. I think early intervention at that age can create a very different dynamic among people. If I have empathy for you, if I can care about you as a child, I'm very likely to carry that behavior throughout my entire relationship, whether they're friends, family, or intimate partners, or my children. I'm likely to be a better parent as well. So we love the opportunity to get in and do bullying prevention education as early and as often as possible.
How often do you deal with this scenario? We hear sometimes parents are saying these days, this is a generation now where everyone gets an award. Mm-hmm. Just for showing up, you get an award. They're talking about mean girls in the classroom. They're talking about, when I went to school, people used to get picked on. Someone used to be called fat or short or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's just normal. How much backlash, or how do you deal with the difference between what some parents and groups will call normal parts of kids being kids and growing up and bullying?
It used to be acceptable to beat your wife with a stick that was no wider than your thumb. That was the law.
That was the law?
That was the law. So
thank goodness it's not the law anymore. I'm going to tell you that.
It's not the law. So that's the phrase the rule of thumb comes from. You can beat your wife with a stick no larger than their thumb. And that was acceptable. It was the law, and it was the way you kept this woman in line. Your children were property. You could do anything you wanted to those children. And we don't live under those conditions anymore. So I like to suggest to parents whose argument is, it's always been this way. It was this way when I grow up. I think we can do better. I think that was violence then, and it's violence now. And we know more. So wouldn't we do more if we know more? And that would be the conversation I'd want to have with them, is that I think our children deserve better than that.
So there's no innocent teasing.
No, teasing really is it's not innocent at all. Teasing is often it's an expression of hostility, and is, I think, often a precursor to physical violence.
Interesting. How receptive have schools been throughout Albany County?
It's difficult. I know with the teaching curriculums that the teachers are using these days, time is of the essence, and I would love to be in more schools.
That sounds very diplomatic. Very diplomatic. How many, off the top of your head, how many schools or how many districts have you been able in Albany County to actually get in and spread the word about bullying?
In the last year, very few. When it first came out, there was a great interest, and we were very involved. But I have to say, we have not done a lot of bullying work. We are in a lot of schools. We're in a lot of middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools. The charter schools are wonderful, and we don't necessarily call it bullying, although, again, on that spectrum of violence. So we do a lot of healthy relationship work, we do a lot of communication skills work, which I think definitely are components to address bullying, but I don't think we're doing a lot of bullying-specific campaigns and workshops. I think we could do more. So I would invite every school in the county to give us a call and contact us. Again, from elementary or even the preschools on up, we'd love to be able to do this work. We talked about the colleges before, and one of my biggest beliefs is that if we're not doing education around consent and preventing sexual violence until someone's 18, we've waited far too long. If we do this work on healthy relationships in elementary schools and friendships and communication skills in middle school and the beginnings of healthy relationship building in high school, by the time they get to college, they have the skills and the tools that they need to make responsible, safe decisions for themselves and for whoever they're with. If we wait until they're 18 and they're off to college, I think we've really missed our opportunity to get in there and be helpful to people while they're making their decisions and setting their behaviors for their future.
I'm talking today with Karen Ziegler, the director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. So we are talking about challenges. Is there, I'm assuming the curriculum is a little bit different when you're talking to a preschooler, obviously, than when you're talking to a middle schooler. Resources, I know, are limited, as important as this is. Would it help if there were additional funding? I'm sure the answer is always yes. But would it help if perhaps the state had a larger role than not just the colleges, but something like almost we've done cradle to career on very different aspects? I mean, is that something that you would be advocating?
I would always advocate for more funding, Mayor. This is huge work, and this is work that I think will go on for generations. And one of the things I think the state could do on levels is mandate, require this type of education. It's not required right now. And I think that if schools had this mandate, that they would be actively seeking alliances. I can speak for the victim assistance programs in New York State. I can speak for the rape crisis programs in New York State. We would love to get in there and do this work. And we don't charge, and we want to have these relationships. One of the things that we work with specifically with the Department of Health is called dosing. If I come into your classroom once a year for 30 minutes, honestly, it's like I gave the kids an M&M and I walked away. But if I can get in the classroom for 30 minutes every other week or once a month, and I can touch on different topics, really kind of all culminating in relationship building and healthy relationships and self-esteem and all those important things. If I can get in there at least even once a month or every year, again, that dosing can make a difference. And I think that's the type of relationships we'd like to have with schools. We want to come in more than just one day a year or even 2 days a year, but how could we get in there on a regular, sustained way that we can actually inform the students as well as the teachers on how that we can work all together to eliminate violence in our communities.
When you go into schools, the schools that you've been in, what's the reaction from the kids? I'm assuming at first they're probably a little quiet.
It can vary. It's interesting. Sometimes they're very receptive. It can depend on the group, but sometimes...
Is that different by age? Are they more receptive when they're younger than when they're older? I think generally,
definitely there's when they're younger, they are more open to different topics. And sometimes when they get older, they've got their belief set. They're more, I don't want to say programmed, but they've been more influenced. And one of the things we are always looking to address is victim blaming. We can get, and it's very sad, young people, young women and young men blaming the victim. Well, it's her fault. What was she doing? Again, back to the domestic violence victim. Why doesn't she leave? The same thing with this, for example, a sexual assault victim or a victim of similar kinds of violence. Well, it's their fault. What were they thinking? What were they doing? The only person who can prevent violence is the offender, is the perpetrator. That's the person who made the decision to have interpersonal violence today. The victim, I'm assuming, like me, is going about their daily life, thinking about things and very busy and trying to get as much done as they possibly can because they're completely overbooked. And I know you can relate to that.
Sure.
And they're not thinking about, oh my gosh, I could be the victim of violence today just because I'm a woman, or just because I parked a little far away, or just because of anything, because it's dark out now. I'm volunteering to be the victim here. That doesn't happen. So I want to definitely would love to be able to work with our young people, again, to not blame the victim, but to hold the offender accountable, because that's really the person's behavior that we're trying to change.
Lots of things to think about. So when it comes to anyone watching this program that is maybe with a school district, a parent who may want to advocate and have their school have you come in for some bullying prevention courses, where can they actually find out more? They can go to our website, right?
Definitely, they can go to our website. We have a lot of information. We've really worked very hard on our website, and definitely thank the county executive support. We have tabs for all kinds of questions and concerns that people could have. We have all of our publications online as well, so people can download those easily. They could contact us if they like more copies. They can contact the office. We'd be happy to go to any classroom, Girl Scout group, Boy Scout group, community group, PTA, you name it. I think you put 3 people in a room and we'll come and we'll talk to you. And if we don't have a specific curriculum prepared for any specific group with their issues, we'll prepare one. We'll create one specifically for that individual with what to address their concerns.
There is also a volunteer component for those who are watching. Let's talk about, we need volunteers. We always need volunteers.
Always. We have 3 basic programs for our volunteers. We have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week sexual assault crisis hotline, and we are always looking for individuals who want to help those who've been victimized. So sometimes it's calls, more often than not, is we go to emergency room and the person's going to have a forensic rape exam, and we provide support and advocacy throughout that process. Our hospitals are wonderful, and they have amazing SANE programs where they have sexual assault nurse examiners or sexual assault examiners, so they're trained. But there's nothing like having somebody there next to you whose only concern is you. The medical professionals, as wonderful as they are, they're collecting evidence, they're dispensing medical advice, they're providing treatment. So they have other things they have to do, but we are there completely and solely for the victim. If they want silence, we're silent. If they want to ask questions, we have answers. If they want some just education, we're happy to provide that. We'll support that individual in whatever decision that they make, and it's very important to empower them in making the right decision for them. So certainly our hotline can always use volunteers. We also do criminal justice advocacy in the various courts throughout Albany County. So we often look for volunteers who want to go to those courts and help victims. The criminal justice system is not victim friendly. It's for lawyers, it's for judges, and the defendant, the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator, is the one with all the rights. Victims don't really have rights in the criminal justice process. They have no voice. The DA's office speaks for them. We are the liaison between the DA's office and the victim. So we're happy to interview the victim, find out what happened. If they know that they're the person that caused the crime, what would they like to see happen? They may be aware that this person has a mental health issue. This person may have a substance abuse issue. They may have suggestions that they would like the court to take into account that they feel may be more appropriate in terms of consequences of whatever this crime was. So we'll convey that to the court. Do they need an order of protection? Do they need restitution? Was something damaged or broken or taken that they would like restitution? So our advocates support that, and we are the point of contact. The ADAs have huge caseloads, and they can't reach out to every victim the way we can. So we provide that service. So if the person has questions they want answered, we can either answer them ourselves or provide that information.
Now everything that you've mentioned, it sounds like it is extremely training intensive. You'd have to be very qualified, one would think, to do any number of things that you've suggested. So what does that take, and what kind of person? is the best volunteer?
It takes a person, I think, who has certainly the willingness and desire to help others. I think they also need to have good self-care skills, because we do want our volunteers to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. We don't want them to burn out or give too much. Communication skills are critical. We do a great deal of training. Our parts of our training, we've tried to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So they're online. We partner with Sage College and we use their Moodle platform. So a great deal of our training can be done at the convenience of the volunteer in their, wherever they are, whatever they're doing. And then we have some very focused skill practice sessions where they come into our office and we have group discussions, and we answer for additional questions, and we practice the skills that we want them to have. We'll take them on a tour of the hospital so that they're familiar with the settings. We can meet our core advocacy volunteers in the courts and get them to know that as well. And we also have the opportunity for folks to volunteer in our office. We do a lot of tablings. We do a lot of outreach events.
Sure.
And we love to have volunteers trained to be able to speak to our services and offer support and services to the community that may be just having some questions.
You talked about you don't want volunteers to burn out. I can imagine you don't want volunteers to burn out. You don't want staff to burn out.
Yes.
How do you avoid that? I mean, I got to tell you, when I hear the numbers, when I hear about what it is that you do and what the center does, while it is uplifting there's someone to do that, I can't imagine the great sadness, the anger, the frustration sometimes when you're dealing with people who don't deserve to have been treated the way they have been treated. How do you prevent that burnout from staff and from volunteers?
We talk about it a lot, Mary. We really make it a conscious effort on our part to address it. We provide regular supervision. I'm very, very fortunate to have amazingly passionate people who believe in what we do and find great meaning in it, and I think that really matters. It's not just a job. This is our vocation. This is what we do. This is what we believe in. So we have that. We share that. So I think there's a great deal of peer support among the staff, as well as great supervision. We have something, and it's just as simple. We at like 4 o'clock on Fridays we have highlights, and it's the children's magazine, and the picture find.
Yep.
Every Friday we do a little highlights. It's 15 minutes. We come together and we just do a little game or two if we can. And it's just kind of fun, and it just takes your mind off the work. And we have champions from week to week, and that type of thing. That just it's a stepping back from the work for a minute, but collectively and sharing something that's just kind of fun and silly, I think matters a great deal.
Wow. In the remaining minute that we have, anyone hearing this who is either sees himself as a victim and needs to get out of a situation or needs help making that determination, give us a number to call.
Please call during the daytime. Please call 447-7100, and evenings and weekends, please call our hotline 447-7716.
The website, alwaysalbanycounty.com, and look for the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. This month of October, you are also looking to get training done in the workplace.
Yes.
If training,
we would love to train every single department in Albany County on domestic violence, how to identify and what to do if there's domestic violence in the workplace. People who are victims are working. They're coming to work and maybe they're bruised or they have other signs and symptoms that there's violence. What to do? Again, that engaged bystander. What to do? How to be helpful. We'd love to train every department. We're working on scheduling them. We're also going to be pulling in the Purple Hands Project, which is these hands are for, and these hands are for holding and for touching and for painting and for anything but violence. We'll be including the Purple Hands Project and the Toiletry Drive.
Excellent. Karen Ziegler, Director of the Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center, thank you. I look forward to seeing the Purple Hands and hearing about all that training.
Thank you so much, Mary.
I'm Mary Rozak. This has been Albany County News. We'll see you again soon.